Hey guys, how's it going? Jesse here. Seeing how Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite games of all time, I thought it would be fitting to look back at the original and see what makes it so goddamn good. Keep in mind, this is my first review of a game, so it's not going to be perfect. But obviously, I will get better over time, as one tends to when they practice at something enough. Without further ado, let's get started.
Resident Evil 4.
Oh yes. First off is the story. Protagonist Leon Sigma Kennedy is an agent that works for the US government who's been tasked with going to an isolated part of Spain in order to save the president's daughter, Ashley Big-Titted Graham, who's been kidnapped by a fanatic cult calling themselves the Los Illuminados. The narrative itself is lengthy, around 15 hours, and is held together by its ever-growing intensity, wide variety of enemy designs, unforgettable action set pieces, and overall likable cast of characters who are, for the most part, well written. Leon himself is an excellent lead, being charismatic, brave, and a heroic badass with hair that I can never have again thanks to my impending baldness. Gotta love genetics. Lewis, who is a very outspoken, cocky, comedic individual with a charming personality. Ada, who acts as the mysterious character in terms of her intentions. If you are playing through the game for the first time, you can't quite pinpoint whether she is good or bad, and that's what makes her such an endearing character, although the dress certainly helps. The merchant, while he doesn't say much, still has the most iconic lines in the game anyway. Plus he sells you all the good shit. I mean guns, obviously. An honorable mention has to go to the dog you save at the beginning of the game, who backs you up during the second boss fight by distracting mutated Shrek. Seriously, if you didn't help set this dog free at the beginning of the game, then you're a despicable human being and you make me 11 kinds of sick. Even the villains, Sadler aka the Big Bad Resi 4 in particular, while they fall into the realm of cliché, all have their own charm. Even though they're really fucking stupid, as they have a tendency to leave their notes around which go into detail about their plans, in places where someone could easily stumble upon them, only for Leon to conveniently find them. Then there's Ashley, who has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. You know how I said overall likable cast of characters? She's the reason I said overall. She is an incredibly annoying, high-maintenance, pampered sow who makes you want to throw the thought off a very high bridge. Ashley isn't the only pimple on the otherwise near spotless ass cheeks that are the story though. For one, certain side characters do not get nearly enough screen time. Take Lewis for example. Right as you're starting to like the guy, eh? Sadler kills him with his dick, I guess? Reminds me of that dude from The Boys actually. Yes, I'm spoiling an almost 20-year-old game. The Big Cheese or the Village Chief is another example. Every time the 7+ foot tall Spanish Kratos is on screen, his presence alone makes you want to dye your underwear. The problem is, he is so underutilized as he is only seen a few times throughout the game, one of which where he has a couple of lines of dialogue then never speaks again. Next thing you know, he too is swiftly killed off. I would have loved to see a scene with Sadler, the Big Cheese, along with Sadler's other lieutenants Salazar and Krauser together to really get the feeling that they're connected. I did mention before the characters are for the most part well written. Well, that's because from time to time the dialogue can be a major dick cheese fest. Lovely examples include,
I'm Ingrid Hunnigan. I'll be your support on this mission.
Loud and clear. Somehow I thought you'd be a little older. Whoever this group is, they sure picked the wrong girl to kidnap.
Speaking of dialogue, when it comes to the voice acting, the actors' vocal performances are done really well.
Used to be a cop myself. Only for a day, though.
I thought I was bad.
Somehow I managed to get myself involved with the incident in Raccoon City on my first day in the force.
Because unlike previous entries in the series, Capcom actually hired people who give convincing performances. They didn't just go outside, pick the first person they saw walking down the street and say, "Hey, would you like to be a voice actor even though you have no experience in the field whatsoever?" Alright, so I've established the story is solid. But a game's story is only part of what makes a game good. The most important part of a game is the gameplay. Whew, shocking, I know. The gameplay, or gunplay in this case, is the best aspect of Resident Evil 4. It's really fast-paced and responsive, thanks to the laser sight within each gun that helps you pinpoint precise areas to shoot on enemies. You can also use a knife during combat scenarios if you're dealing with 1 or 2 enemies at a time. The knife is a pretty damn effective way to kill weaker enemies. There go, saving you a lot of ammo in the long run. Especially when an enemy is knocked to the ground, and you can slice them right in the booty a bunch of times. Just don't try using your knife on this guy, cause his are a lot bigger. Back on the topic of shooting. The satisfaction you get from shooting an SOB in the face and kicking them after the fact is like the equivalent of farting in a car and hearing the reactions of everyone else inside the vehicle upon smelling the fart. You also get the same feeling when you pull off a successful headshot, and what follows is that oh so satisfying sound. You start off the game with having nothing more than a dinky-sized pistol, and you are barely able to overcome your first major battle. But it doesn't take long before you can either buy weapons from the merchant, or find them in the environment, and add them to your arsenal. And this game has a pretty sizable arsenal, including pistols, shotguns, sniper rifles, magnums, submachine guns that turn enemies into Swiss cheese, grenades that come in 3 different flavors, one that makes "this girl is on fire" a reality, one that turns enemies into meat-flavored soup, and one that temporarily blinds enemies, leaving them wide open for a daily dose of Roadhouse. Flash grenades also have the added benefit of full-on killing these annoying head-bursting dick whistles. You can also buy a rocket launcher, which is a godsend during really difficult enemy encounters. And my personal favorite, the mine thrower, which reduces enemies into bite-sized treats. Naturally, enemies do become tougher as the game goes on. Thankfully, you can compensate for this by buying new weapons from the merchant. You can also upgrade the weapons you already have in terms of firepower, reload time, and how many bullets a single clip or magazine can hold at a time. But weapons aren't the only things you can upgrade. You can also upgrade the size of your suitcase, which helps you carry all those herbs you don't need. You actually can't buy bullets from the merchant though. Normally this would be an issue, but because this game chucks ammo at you, like when the Who's kept force-feeding the Grinch all that questionable looking food, you rarely have to worry about having a lack of ammunition, which is a huge plus, considering the abundance of enemies whose wigs you'll be blowing back. Another thing you don't have to worry about is having a lack of money for buying or upgrading weapons. If you thoroughly explore the environment, you'll be rewarded with valuables in the form of treasure chests filled with pesetas, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, jewels, and a whole ass load of these. You can also obtain these valuables by defeating enemies. Mini-bosses and bosses in particular end up rewarding you with Kardashian-sized booties worth of gold, or an extremely valuable item which you can then sell to the merchant for the mountain of pesetas you'll be rolling in. Also, there are items you'll find that upon combining other valuables with them, their selling value goes even higher. The one thing you do have to worry about though is not being able to reload while moving. Yeah, let me just stand perfectly still and reload while this chainsaw-wielding Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th Part 2 looking motherfucker closes in and decapitates me with one swift motion. Also, the movement feels a tad bit clunky. Just a little bit. The game transitions between action and horror damn near flawlessly. I said near flawless because towards the end of the game, I feel like I got a little too action focused for my liking, and no longer bothered transitioning to the slower, creepier moments like beforehand. Aside from the final stretch, the transition between both elements is excelente. One moment you'll be mowing down enemies in intense firefights, and that's where those unforgettable action set pieces I mentioned earlier come in. Like when you're confined in a cabin with Lewis and Ashley, the latter of whom hides instead of being helpful, because of course, and you along with Lewis are forced to fight off a massive horde of ganados which pour into the cabin and make your anxiety levels reach an all-time high. Or instead of being trapped in a cabin with ganados, you're trapped in a collection of minecarts with them that are going down a track at Mach fucking speed. Keep in mind, during this segment of the game, several ganados are wielding chainsaws. Like, why? The next moment you'll be taking a break from the shooting to soak in the world around you during the quieter moments, until those quieter moments become a little less quiet, where you then find yourself in a more closed off area that focuses less on action, and more on the enemies or even a full on Smitty small boss that makes you regurgitate your soul. Yes, despite what some people say about this game not being scary, they're full of shit, piss, and vinegar. Fact is, even if you exclude all the very action heavy set pieces, this game still has a lot of creepy moments. Hell, I remember the first time I played this game as a chillin' on the GameCube and struggling to enter this here cabin after seeing the guy's silhouette in the cutscene. I mustered up all the courage I had just to enter that stank-ass shit shack. Even if the guy inside of it was human, the tension set up by the cutscene prior is what made it daunting in the first place, and that really creepy dream Leon had where he transformed into a monster. First-time players, including myself, thought it was real, making it even scarier. When you realize it's only a dream, you along with Leon are overcome with a sense of relief. What really makes a game scary though is comprised of 3 pillars. The first pillar is the enemies. Of course, a horror game wouldn't be nearly as scary if the enemies weren't designed in a way that makes you wee yourself. I'm happy to report the enemy variety in this game is not only really good, but the enemies themselves are all kinds of freaky. And not in the good way. What I like about the enemies in Resident Evil 4 is they aren't your typical slow, brain-dead zombies. As a matter of fact, they're not even zombies at all. They are the Las Plagas, which are these disgusting parasitic organisms that upon fusing with the host, mutate said host into an incredibly hostile creature. One of whom can run as fast, if not faster than a human being, and is smarter than any dumber than a bag of stump zombie could ever hope to be. Still stupid though, as evident of the whole leaving notes around thing. Stupidity aside, I really appreciate the fact the enemies start off as being basic white bread bitch humans, but as the game progresses, you are gradually introduced to new enemies, whether they're mutated forms of the aforementioned human enemies, or something else entirely. By the by, I will try my absolute best to pronounce the names of these certain enemies correctly, yet will still most likely unintentionally butcher some of them anyway. The non-boss enemies, which I consider the biggest standouts, are the Garradors, or as I like to call them, the distant cousins of Wolverine, who are blind as a tit in a snowstorm, yet compensate for their lack of sight with their incredible hearing. In other words, if you move at normal speed or fire your gun at anything other than a bell, they will dart towards you and turn your ass into bacon strips. It also doesn't help that the only weak point is the Las Plagas on their back. The Armadura, who are Las Plagas controlling a suit of armor instead of someone's meat suit. Because of this, they're a lot more durable. And don't even get me started on the way they approach you. The scariest non-boss enemies are the Regenerators. Butt-ass, tall, naked gray humanoids, who, as their name implies, can regenerate upon losing limbs. They also make really disturbing noises, which make them sound like a possessed cat. To make matters worse, there is an even tougher variant of Regenerators known as Iron Maidens, who are covered in massive spikes. Although despite their creepy designs, they become a lot easier to contend with once you find the thermal scope, which allows you to locate their weak points in the form of parasites and shoot them into non-existence. As cool as the non-boss enemies' designs are, the bosses, on the other hand, take it another step further with a level of creativity in terms of their designs in ways they make you shit yourself. I mean, sure, you can one-shot most bosses with an RPG, but then you would be missing out on the most intense encounters in the game. More often than not, you are forced to fight these bosses in closed-off, isolated areas. That really solidifies how terrifying they truly are. The first of 2 of the best examples are the Vertigo, who is this disgusting human-insect hybrid with a scorpion tail who hunts your ass down in the sewers and runs faster than a dad does who says he's going to get some milk. Due to how fast and durable the Nightmare Inducer is, the only efficient means of damaging him is by freezing his armor, which slows him down and makes his durable skin more susceptible to damage. The second example is the U3, an amalgamation of humanoid, insect, and reptile DNA, who is easily the biggest pants shitter enabler in the entire game. What makes this fight really interesting is how dynamic it is. One moment you are trapped in several giant crates suspended in the air with this big old pile of fuck that, wondering when he's gonna pop up next. During this phase of the fight, you can't actually kill him, but you can shoot him enough times where he decides to back off for a little bit. Then the next moment, you're fighting the bastard head-on in a small arena, where at this point, a giant-ass worm with huge razor-sharp pinchers has grown out of his back. Moving on to the second pillar, the environments. On an aesthetic standpoint, the environments look really good. Each of the 3 key areas is vastly distinct in terms of their themes, yet despite the environment's distinct themes, they still manage to maintain an equal level of eeriness. The village is more grimy, with structures that look like they can fall apart after only a single puff of breath from a particular wolf. Watering holes are infested with maggots. Bed sheets are stained with either dry blood, shit, or both. Best not worth thinking about. While the castle has a medieval theme, cause duh. It's much cleaner and far better constructed than the village, but it's also more dangerous, as it's filled with deadly traps, prisons, mines, an uncomfortably dark, dank-ass sewer and cave. The island has a military theme, and is filled with laboratories where it's painfully evident that really gnarly shiznit has gone down in the form of unethical experiments. On a graphical standpoint, while the character models still hold up nowadays, I can't say the same for a lot of the environmental textures. They're fugglier than Pearl from Blade. I mean, look at this! You can't even read what's on the fucking paper. Yes, I know the game is considered ancient at this point, but I have seen games made around the same time period that have much better environmental textures, like Metroid Prime and 2. Bottom line, it's not game-breaking, just very outdated. More so than the Prime examples I've given. Also, while playing the game at a much higher frame rate and resolution is a huge plus, a huge minus is the oversaturated piss color filter on the HD version. I don't recall the GameCube version having this. If Capcom's purpose for adding this overly bright PP filter was to make players realize how dated the environments look, then congratulations, you passed with flying fucking carpets. The final pillar is sound. When it comes to the sound of the guns firing, the explosion of one's head, or the noises creatures make, it's rock solid. That was the epitome of a dad joke. While the in-game sounds are really good, the soundtrack on the other hand is sublime, my dudes and dudettes. Depending on the environment you're in or the enemies you're dealing with, the soundtrack will shift to perfectly mimic the exact vibe the environments or creatures give off. The best examples are when you battle the Novastators. Oh, I know I butchered that. Or as I like to call them, Grasshopper Men, for the first time in the castle sewers. The soundtrack accompanying their presence is incredibly unsettling and ominous. It does an excellent job of conveying the feeling that you are stuck between fucked in a hard place, bud. While we're on the topic of music, the save room theme falls under the complete opposite side of the spectrum. The best way I can describe it is it's very warm and welcoming. Like when there's a huge snowstorm, but you're in the safety of your own toasty crib, covered with a nice soft blanket, and drinking a big-ass cup of marshmallow-filled hot chocolate. The moment you enter the save room and that music kicks in, instant orgasm. One of several gameplay aspects I do not care for at all are these incredibly goofy and out-of-place QuickTime event boulder chase sequences. Like, who am I? Indiana Jones? And if you're not being chased by a boulder, then you're being chased by a giant statue of Salazar. Salazar? Fuck it. The QuickTime events non-involving chase sequences that occur during specific cutscenes are thankfully executed much better. Naturally, what makes this gimmick interesting is at the time, QTEs weren't overdone like they are nowadays. Back when this game released, people didn't typically find themselves interacting with the cutscenes in any way, as they are the equivalent of watching a movie. But this game surprised a lot of players by making the cutscenes interactive to some capacity. And it's done in a way where if you fail the QTE, you don't just trip, get up, and try again. If you screw up even once, you dead. Which is why even during the cutscenes, you need to keep your hands on the controller and press any button at a moment's notice, like a gunslinger who draws his weapon quicker than his opponent does. I think it's universally agreed upon the best QTE in the game is the Krauser knife fight, as it not only looks really cool, but also requires the fastest reflexes and the most attention out of any other cutscene with QTEs. The thing about these QuickTime events is that they aren't done to the point where it feels overstuffed. The worst aspect of gameplay is without a shred of a doubt babysitting Ashley. In case I haven't made it crystal clear already, I, along with everyone else who's a fan of this game and has a lick of common sense, cannot stand her. She is the worst sidekick in gaming. First off, she's annoying. So annoying, in fact, you just want to call it quits and let the bad guys have her. She constantly screams, "Leon!" and not in the way that you want her to. She is also allergic to climbing down ladders or jumping off ledges apparently, since she relies on Leon to catch her when she jumps. Seriously though, are you really that incapable of climbing down a ladder or a ledge? The worst aspect of Ashley though is her utter uselessness. Every time an enemy tries kidnapping her, she doesn't even try breaking free. Like, come on girl! Put your fingers in their eyes, pull a Rick Grimes and rip their throat out, or even kick them in the dragon in their clutch of eggs. If she started out as a pampered, useless sow, then gradually developed into a badass character who can not only fend for herself, but also help Leon throughout the game, even during combat akin to how Atreus in God of War grew stronger as the game progressed, then I'd be all for that. The problem is, she doesn't go through any kind of development in the game. Plus, the relationship between her and Leon, in my opinion, could have been fleshed out a hell of a lot more. Healing is another issue with Ashley, as in I shouldn't have to worry about her health, especially seeing how I'm already struggling to keep mine in check. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Sadler want her alive? So then why in the authentic fuck are his minions trying to kill her? Also, the worst time spent with Ashley is in this level. Seriously, fuck this level with every fiber of my being. For those of you who haven't played Resident Evil 4, this level is the hardest part of the game. Enemies are coming at you from every corner and will not only attack Leon, but Ashley the cowering blonde pig as well. She is such a bitch that upon seeing Lewis's corpse after he is murdered by Sadler, she says, wait for it, absolutely, positively, fucking nothing. Really? He's right there. Do you have nothing to say? Apparently ignorance is bliss. There are a couple moments in the game where you can command her to hide in the trash, where she belongs, giving you a chance to clear the area of enemies without worrying about her safety. Unfortunately, these opportunities are few and far between. Speaking of commands, the ones you give her boil down to wait, hide, or follow me. Not really much substance to it. Capcom really should have let you unlock more commands as you progress through the game. Like, stop complaining so much. Climb down the ladder yourself. Be useful for once in your pathetic 20-year-old life and help me fight this wave of enemies. Thankfully, she gets kidnapped in the game so many times, leaving you by yourself and giving you the peace and quiet you so rightfully deserve. Yes, I realize how horrible that sounds when taken out of context, but for anyone who has beaten this game, you know. There is a small portion where you unwillingly play as her. I thought it was actually handled surprisingly well, considering who you're playing as. The difference of Ashley in her own segment versus when she's with Leon is that you're not contending with a massive horde of enemies while she's just crouched there in the fetal position, being useless in every sense of the word. There are a couple enemies you do have to deal with when you play as her, some of which you can kill by chucking lanterns at them, while others you have to flat out run away from on the account of them being armaduras, while you on the other hand are just an insignificant little beast of burden. Despite Ashley having to deal with several confrontations herself, it's never anything that overwhelms you. I like this segment because it is such a stark contrast, as opposed to when you're playing as Leon Scott Sigma Roundhouse Kick Kennedy and can mow down enemies like an Apache helicopter. With the playable Ashley segment, on the other hand, you're way more vulnerable, which in turn adds to the creep factor. With all that out of the way, there's the final topic I wanted to address. Extras, as in does this game make you keep coming back for more? Well, upon completing the game you unlock Professional Mode, which is Resident Evil 4's equivalent of Hard Mode, and New Game Plus, where you get to start from the beginning with all your weapons and upgrades that you acquired in your first playthrough. See, this is how Leon should have come prepared, as opposed to showing up with one measly gun including 10 bullets. He must have known the merchant was going to be there. He must have. A shooting gallery that awards you with wee little figurines upon getting a high enough score. Ada! 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 You also unlock new outfits and weapons on subsequent playthroughs. I just don't have any footage of the outfits because I'm not in the mood to play through the game again. For now. There's also separate ways which tells Resident Evil 4's story from Ada's point of view. While it's not nearly as good as the main campaign, I still think it's pretty good. and the best extra mode is the Mercenaries mode, with the goal being kill as many enemies as possible before the time runs out in order to achieve the best score possible. What will give you incentive to keep playing this mode is by getting a 4-star rating in each level. You can unlock new characters, each with their own weapons and abilities. And if you get a 5-star rating with each character in each level, you'll unlock a really powerful magnum called the hand cannon, which you can then purchase from the merchant. Safe to say, this game is filled to the brim with extra content, so it gets a 10 out of 10 in that department. That's my Canadian accent, by the way. I'm Canadian, in case you haven't already figured it out. If it were nowadays, though, you'd be paying for the extra modes via DLC, because companies just love squeezing your financial tit for every last cent. Overall, despite its few issues, Resident Evil 4 is like a roller coaster that keeps going up and rarely sees any dips along the way. In my opinion, it's one of the greatest games ever made, and it paved the way for other amazing third-person over-the-shoulder action horror titles like Dead Space 1 and 2, except for 3. We don't talk about that one. I give Resident Evil 4 9 dead Ashleys out of 10.